That was a great moment. Well, it wasn't recorded on video. I mean, I made a blip saying like, moms are good at micromanaging. What? Oh man, all the parents are gonna like come to me and
Wow.
ask me what's wrong. What's wrong with you, Daylon? We have a tough job. Anyway, welcome,
Oh my
welcome
God.
everyone. Thomas, I believe is your colleague.
Yeah.
And welcome Isabel, welcome Jade and Rachel. And yeah, does any of you want to like turn on your video and just say hello, or just unmute your mic and say hello, at very least?
Hello.
I Yeah, lovely. So Isabel, how did you find out about us? I don't think I've seen you around before.
I received an email about this, then I want to join.
Oh, lovely. That's great. Okay, all my time spending writing newsletter has not gone to waste. All right, Shraddha, welcome. Tiffany, welcome again. Awesome. Actually, you know what? Let's just begin. Right, it's 8 p.m. It's a good time. We're gonna do a 45-minute conversation. So everyone who just joined us, I'm sure more people will join in the next couple of minutes. Everyone who just joined us, I'm Daylon. I'm the founder of CuriousCore, and I run a technology-enabled education startup, right? So I train, coach, and teach people to break into the user experience design industry, and also serve organizations in helping them to transform through consulting and organization development. And I was speaking to design leaders on a usual basis, and I speak to them quite regularly. And I happened to reach out to Yen, who was very, very kind to share her knowledge and her experience. And I want to give Yen a proper introduction over here. So Yen used to be the user experience lead for a platform called HOOQ, which is kind of like the Netflix alternative, but for Southeast Asia. And I think what was really interesting is that she has worked in Brunei before she actually, like all this 7 years of amazing work experience has led her to where she is today, where she is at Standard Chartered. She's leading a team, and we spoke about a lot of things about designing for financial services, and we connected on that basis. And it all came when there was this story that that was publicized on the internet, that this guy who used this app called Robinhood, this 20-year-old guy in the US who used this app called Robinhood, which is about investing, saw that he had a paper loss of like I think over $750,000 or something like that. And because of the way the app was designed, that created this like paper loss, he thought he could never pay back that loss, and he just like decided to commit suicide. And when I saw it, I was like, what? This entire incident and episode could have been prevented. And that's why I'm getting Yen to come this week as our honored guest, to share with us the nuances of designing for financial services, because designing for financial services is very different from designing for shopping sites and designing for other products and services. So I think Yen's seasoned UXer. She balances business needs and user goals. She is also a geek. I think self-professed. I'll let her fill in whatever she wants to fill in terms of details.
Thanks,
So,
Ethan.
Yen, over to you. Anything else that I miss out?
Um, yeah, I mean, thanks for having me. As you can see, the swords on the wall are from The Witcher. So, my husband and I are
Whoa.
great fans. So we've gotten the real replica swords.
Oh, wow. Oh, you played The Witcher. Wow, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
my favorite.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah. So I've actually been at Standard Chartered for about 2.5 years. Prior to that, I was at HOOQ and I was the design lead. And we were launched in Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, Singapore, and India. So when I joined, we were about 300K users, and we brought the product to a point where it's gone to about 16 million when I left. I think it's grown since then. And then after that, I joined the SCB. At SCB, I'm actually a UX designer who used to design for advisory and wealth products. So basically, like what Daylon mentioned, we focus on investors and how we could help them grow their portfolio and their wealth. I've recently switched to another team, but still within SC Design, and I'm designing the app for retail clients going forward. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you for sharing in and filling out the details. Wow, these are, yeah, I can recognize this. I played The Witcher 3. So, wow. Okay, it's cool to find another fan. And, oh, wow, even the poster. Wow. Okay, that's yeah, yeah. So why not, let's start with that, right? Like, tell us how big of a geek you are and how has being a geek, helped you in your work? Yeah.
A huge geek. I've always been a fan of games and comic books, and a lot of things that I've learned about UI actually come from games. Yeah, I'm curious about how levels get designed and how users get motivated to go from being a complete beginner to kind of leveling up in skills and then being invested in the characters as you progress through the story. I think a lot of this comes from game design, as well as melding it kind of into the narrative.
Wow.
Yeah, so I spend many hours on games.
Lovely. So, when were you first exposed to this idea of like user experience design or UI design?
Yeah.
Like,
So I actually graduated in marketing, and I kind of stumbled upon UX by chance. It just so happened that when I graduated, my friend who was in an app development agency, 2359 Media, she actually said, "Hey, we're looking for designers. Would you like to join us?" And at that time, when I joined, UX and UI were not specialized fields. There were web designers, there were app designers, there were visual designers, and everything was kind of all in the same ball. But I think as I learned and talked to clients along the way, the emphasis shifted to how a user would experience the app that we were trying to build for them. And so I started to see that there was value in understanding the user and understanding how they would interact with the products, and how it would meet their needs to do so.
that's lovely. It almost sounds like you fell into the role, right? It's like the opportunity presented itself, and then like you grab it and then you ran with it.
Yeah, never look back.
Cool. So yeah, I thought that's really great. And I kind of had a similar story as well, kind of falling into the role of product management. But I think what was really interesting that stood out for me in your profile is that you chose to work in Brunei for a period of time. Of all countries, why Brunei? Like, I never even been there. Like, what's in Brunei?
I think that kind of fell into my lap as well.
Yeah.
Most of the opportunities are kind of that way. But it felt like an interesting shift because the idea of kind of moving out of Singapore to experience what the rest of Southeast Asia looks like was interesting to me at that time. And also Brunei was facing a very interesting problem. The team I joined at Brunei was actually a team that was working together with the Ministry of Education in Brunei to kind of design tools that teachers and students could use in the classroom. And that, for me, had direct impact on many people's lives and the way they learn inside and outside of the classroom. So for me as a designer, that spoke to me as well.
Wow. Are you still in touch with anyone in the Bruneian community, or people that you have like sort of impacted while you were doing work there?
Yeah, I'm still Facebook friends with a lot of the people from the MOE there. And I see their goings on. I'm following their Facebook page as well, and they've moved on to creating a lot of other interactive products.
Wow, that's true impact. That's the true impact of education. So
And
thank you
it's
for,
so happy.
yeah, thank you for doing that. That's wonderful. And you know what are some of the things you learn about the Bruneian culture? Because working in a different country, adapting to a different culture, how has that make you a better designer?
I think when I first moved there, it was quite a bit of a culture shock because in Singapore, we are very open about our ideas and opinions. And we are very fast moving. If we didn't like something, we would say, hey, that's not good enough. Let's do it better. However, I think the pace of life in Brunei is a lot slower. And so there was a little bit of a need to kind of recalibrate. And slow is not bad. Slow actually gives you time to think about things a lot more clearly. And also because the relationships between the team members had to be built. And I think Bruneian and the Malay culture is quite different in a sense where there is a kampong spirit. And if you build good relationships with the people in MOE as well as the teachers and students, they are a lot more open to sharing their ideas with you. And it took a little bit of time to get that kind of rapport as well.
Lovely. Thank you for sharing, Yen. For those of you who just joined on Facebook, that we have some live audience on Facebook as well. We have Yen over here from Standard Chartered Design. She's the UX lead over there, and she's talking about her overseas work history. And for those of you who just joined us, thank you for attending and spending the next 45 minutes with us. So back on track to like your career journey, right? You ended up working for HOOQ, which at that time is I would say an unconventional choice because you could work anywhere else, right? So why come back to Singapore? Why work for this startup which was relatively unknown? Yeah.
Right. So I think I faced a lot of differences in context when I moved to Brunei, and I really understood like what it meant when the power goes out when it rains, and you don't get internet for a while, and your internet is spotty, and there's a lot of other different contextual factors, right? Like if I wanted to watch a show on the go, what would I do then? How would I plan my media for the rest of the day? And actually that was a problem that a lot of the rest of Asia actually faced.
Okay.
Singapore are actually quite blessed. And that really helped me in my role at HOOQ, because I could understand what the context was, what the problems the users were facing, and kind of having lived in Brunei for a year and a half, kind of see and understand and experience it for yourself. You get a deeper understanding of how to design and who to design for.
That's cool. Would you say that you 1.5 years you spent in Brunei that really gave you an advantage as a candidate when you were interviewing for HOOQ, just because of that? I've lived somewhere else and I understand another culture.
Yeah, I think it did. It really did.
Okay, that's good. So yeah, first career advice: find overseas work opportunities or opportunities to kind of work with overseas users, right? So that's the first one. In general, how do you kind of like learn? Because you said you were in marketing, right? So how did you kind of build up your own confidence as a designer? How do you kind of I know you build up experience by working, but how do you build your confidence as a designer? How do you learn along the way?
I guess there was a lot of trial and error, especially when I first started. My skills in design were basically illustration skills that I had on Photoshop. And at that time, it was really, really difficult for me to use that Photoshop skills to design an interface, because there were so many nuances. There was, when I joined, it was very skeuomorphic. The design trend was skeuomorphic, right?
I remember that.
Of patterns,
I remember back then.
Backgrounds, textures that I had to kind of learn on the go. And I did a lot of online learning by taking short courses. And I learned a lot of my UX skills from actually Coursera. I took gamification, human-computer interfaces, and those courses helped me along the way.
And I guess you also had to have the discipline to, and commitment to actually finish it, because we all know that online courses have very poor completion rates. More than 80% of people don't complete the online course they sign up for.
Yeah. And I think another thing was I had very good design leaders that I looked up to. The studio manager at 2359 when I first joined was fantastic, and he showed me the ropes. And basically, when you attain a basic skill set, it's easy for you to think about what you want to learn going from there.
That's really great. And we have our first question from Tiffany. Tiffany, hello. Tiffany is a General Assembly graduate. So, and she kind of like submitted her portfolio in one of the webinars to be reviewed. So Tiffany asked, actually, Tiffany, why don't you just ask the question since you turned on the video?
Yeah, hi Yan. Thanks for taking the time. So recently I did a pro bono client project with an investment research company, and we had a lot of trouble trying to get users for like interview and usability testing. Also because they're so busy, right? Like every second counts, every moment counts, and if it's not making them money, they would rather not do it. So I was wondering whether you had any experience with that, and how do you overcome it?
Actually, we do. We get that issue all of the time, because first of all, as a bank, you cannot reach out to clients directly, because that is a violation of their personal privacy, right? And the second thing is, when I was designing for advisory and wealth management, you want to speak with clients who are in the correct investing bracket. They invest in the type of products that you're designing for, and they are in the correct income bracket. So basically, defining your user is one task, and then going out and getting those users that you've defined is the second problem, right? So I think, and also because a lot of our users that we were designing for were not in Singapore in the first place. So there were Hong Kong clients, African clients that you really have no access to whatsoever. So one way we've overcome this is to work with a good recruitment agency. What that means is basically you outline the type of user that you're looking for and the kind of test that you would like to conduct. Bring this to them, have them qualify the candidates, because if you interview the wrong kind of user, you get the wrong kind of results, or rather you don't get the results that you're looking for from the users that you want. And so what we did was we worked a lot with a user recruitment agency who would get the people to come in. Sometimes what we would do also, we would have translators. For example, if it was a Hong Kong market, we would have a Cantonese translator come in and help us translate the questions as well as translate the answers, because there would be lots of answers that were colloquial that we wouldn't understand because we didn't understand the language that well. So I'm not sure if that really answered your question, but that was how we went about it most of the time.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that.
I can add on to say, Tiffany, I hope you're remunerating some of these users, because that also helps to a certain extent by actually providing some form of a remuneration.
Yes.
There is a benefit for them to actually take time off and help you out. So that is something, of course, you shouldn't pay from your own pocket, but rather the organization that you're helping should pay from their pocket. So even back at Razor, one of the things that we did when I was recruiting people to do our research is that we say we'll give them a $50 Razor eStore voucher that they can spend on the store. So people are willing to take a half an hour call and talk to me. And of course, I have to do the screening and things like that. So kind of discuss with your management to see if you can remunerate them. Yeah.
I think the other thing also is if you find users that respond really well to your app, for example, they would give you feedback, or if they've called in customer service and they had issues, that's something that you can follow up on and kind of reach out to them and ask them, hey, why are you having this problem? How do you feel about this? And you could begin conversations from there in an informal way. Also, if you could have users from past interviews come back and provide feedback maybe half a year later, that would show you a lot more about how you're progressing as an app.
Yeah, that's actually awesome advice. Every time I end a user interview, I say, hey, are you open to like coming back and giving us feedback? And say sometimes they even tell me I will do it for free because I love the brand so much. So yeah, these are the kind of people you want to keep in a list. I think this is great. So Tiffany, is good? You got the answers? All right.
I did.
Awesome.
Thank you, Ian.
So let's carry on the thread of financial services since we're talking about it. Yan, we spoke very briefly in a Zoom call, and we talked about some of the nuances, and you gave some really interesting insights about designing for financial services, right? So earlier we talked about like this guy who committed suicide because there was a blip in the user experience. The numbers were not presented properly, and that caused a lot of anxiety and a lot of confusion. You want to talk a little bit about that incident, and then you can maybe refer back to the work you do. Yeah.
Actually, that's a problem that I would say keeps me up, because the last thing you want as a designer is for someone to read the interface wrongly, and then do something really drastic, or lose all their money, or if they've lost their money, they don't know. That's I guess the worst fear for me as a designer in finance.
Wow.
And you really have to be careful with how you document transactions, document changes in portfolio holdings, things like that. Yeah.
And how do you what are the measures, or rather what do you have a checklist, or do you have certain measures or extra precautions you take as a design team at Standard Chartered to prevent such things from happening? Yeah,
I think one thing we do is we usability test as often as we can, and that means to bring users through the flow and to understand what they found difficult to read and understand, and then provide help for users from there through the interface. I think usability testing really calls out a lot of the issues that the users had throughout the flow, which could really impact their buy or sell decision. Yeah, that was one of the things that we did. Also, the other thing we would do is to have speed bumps. So if, say, a user is going to make a giant transaction with $10,000-$15,000 at one go, we would introduce a speed bump so that the user would be able to take a pause, understand that this is the amount of money going out, for example, and then agree or disagree to move forward. And I think that really helps to allow the user some time and space to think about what they're trying to do. Because I think for a lot of other app design, for example, my experience at HOOQ, which was multimedia, you want to get a user to be able to do something as fast and easy as possible. But when it comes to financial decisions, there is benefit in taking a pause to think it through.
That's wonderful. And I remember we spoke a little bit about this element of trust in design, right? Because part of our job as user experience designers is to actually present a design that is credible. And I think I briefly shared with you, we conducted workshops in Malaysia, and we had insurance tech startup present designs that are very cartoonish. And because they want to make it look very, very friendly and more appealing to a mass audience. But then through the user research, they discovered that that it actually harmed their credibility. They thought it's a brand that you can't take seriously, right? So especially for an insurance firm, that's not good, because you're committing to investing in it for the long term. So I just want to get your thoughts on it, because you shared with me some data points on a similar insight on that.
Yeah, so we've actually done testing on insurance as well in Africa, and we presented different screens with different levels of information. And consistently clients will go through the flow and ask for additional information on unique selling points. For example, what if I had this issue before I was 65? Would I be able to claim? Would I not be able to claim? And so I think the less information you have, when it looks too simple, users start to think about, hey, is this showing me all that I have to know? Is it painting a correct picture and a full picture for me to be able to make my decision? And what we would do is to introduce crutches, which would mean basically we would show only the crucial information at the level 1, and then allow the user to explore and find level 2, level 3, level 4 information if they so desire. And the information has to be there. It can be kind of compartmentalized so that the user can move through the information at their own pace. But it does have to be there. So for example, if we didn't show any sales charges, then users will be asking us, are there any sales charges when I make this transaction? Are you hiding that from me? Why are you hiding that from me? So everything has to be called out.
Right. So you have to say basically there's no sales charge, like literally put it there.
Exactly.
Okay. And I recall as well, a big part of designing for financial services is meeting the regulatory requirements. And there are regulatory colleagues. When I was working at Aviva, I mean, I will hear them talk about regulations, like we need to get approvals. It's going to take some time and things like that. And I was like, oh man, it's just going to slow things down. And I was like, and I didn't really enjoy that process. But I want to find out your experience working on the regulatory aspects, especially from banking perspective. Yeah,
I think regulatory processes are necessary. Really, there's two kinds of regulatory processes for me personally. There would be an internal regulation, and then there would be external regulators, for example, MAS, who might want to be auditing the app. So these are definitely necessary, and the earlier you can speak with them and have them understand what you're designing for who, the easier it would be for them to call out if there were any points that the project should be taking note of.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. I want to, since we're talking about money, since we're talking about finances, I want to actually understand, are there any interesting insights that you found out or you discovered about people's attitudes with money in different countries that you worked in?
So I think one thing we've learned that was really interesting about Hong Kong was that users, when they looked at investment products, they were also interested in finding out what others were investing in, for example, so that they could benchmark themselves against people who were their peers or at the same stage of investing as them. So it was kind of
super competitive, man.
Yeah, super competitive and kind of relevant, staying relevant with people in the market at the same time. However, for example, investors in Singapore would be a lot more individualistic. They would be asking, what are my investment opportunities? What are my investment objectives? What do I want to achieve in 5 years? How risky am I supposed to be? And then we would ask them if they would be interested in other investors who were at a similar investing stage, and they would be, but not nearly as important as my own goals. So I think the takeaway really is that culturally speaking, every place is different. In fact, every user is different. The things that they look for when they invest would be different as well.
I think that's such an interesting insight, and thank you for sharing that with us. Very apt. When you said that, I was like, that sounds a lot like Hong Kong, just because of the people I know there, right? Like we are very competitive.
I wouldn't really generalize as well, but that was kind of the insight that we found. That said, not every user is the same. There could be users who are only interested in their own personal wealth development.
Yeah, I think definitely it's important to consider the objectivity of the data as well. But that's such a fun insight. And when we talk about, the challenges of designing for financial services, what are some of the challenges that you've encountered designing for financial services versus other types of products?
I think by nature, financial services tend to be a lot more complex, or rather, for me in particular, investing is a complex activity by nature, and we need to embrace that complexity because in order to be able to invest, you need to understand how the products work, and that really was a learning curve for me when I joined Standard Chartered, because there was complexity in the financial product itself, and then there was kind of taking that complexity and condensing it into a flow that for users was easy to understand and that could educate the users wherever it wasn't.
Yeah, I smiled because like you remind me of the time where we tried to reduce the number of steps people have to take to kind of sign up for an insurance policy, and I'm actually pretty glad that a company like FWD like cracked it and managed to get through that process. But yeah, you're so right in saying that it is complex by nature when we do it physically. And we have to respect the regulatory requirement of it, and we have to respect why all these checks and balance are in place. And even though, say, I once heard this when I was working in one of the companies, and they say we want to have a Netflix-like experience, and I was like, okay, right, but should it have a Netflix-like experience? Like, can financial services have a Netflix-like experience? Because Netflix is about binging, right? So how are we going to do that for financial services? So that's definitely something to consider. If you're having any questions, and for those of you who just joined Facebook, I see the count of number of people tuning in Facebook increasing. We have Yen from Standard Chartered Bank Design, and she's very experienced in terms of managing design in the region. And she used to be the UX design lead for HOOQ. So just having a conversation about designing for financial services. Right now, I'm going to ask her a few other questions about her career and maybe about COVID. Yeah, how has COVID been for you, Yen?
Actually, I've been enjoying it. I'm by nature an introvert, so for me, that's just living my best life.
Okay, wow.
No, but honestly, it's really taught me that people can be efficient and work together well, even remotely. And that was something that I, as a designer, kind of really understood now, because I mean, design is very collaborative, right? You're used to seeing lots of people, your Scrum team, your dev team, your business stakeholders all of the time, and realizing that you can work just as well remotely is quite refreshing.
Lovely. And how has it changed the way you work with your team, right? Like I'm interested, especially for a bigger organization, you have multiple designers. I heard before the call you said you currently lead a team of 20 designers. So
I'm just one of the 20 designers.
You're one of the 20 designers. Okay, so how do you guys manage your design projects now during the COVID period?
Yeah, so there are many design projects going on at the same time, as is quite normal for bigger organizations. And we do have design stand-ups once every week, just to make sure that we're caught up on kind of what everyone's working on at the same time, and also to bring up issues that we have in our design. So if we had trouble with designing a certain flow or certain screens, then we would bring it up during the design stand-ups. Or if we had issues kind of working things out with stakeholders, then we would ask for advice from the other people in the room. So that's one thing that we do. Also, in terms of things like Scrum Ceremonies, which I have with my team, backlog refinements, product refinements, I would still continue to have them with my product owners, as well as the rest of the dev team.
Lovely. And has it, would you say that because what I hear you say is that communication has become more efficient, right? And do you find yourself going into more meetings because now you can't meet in person? So you see yourself spending more time being in online meeting rooms.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Okay, then it's a very common it's a very common phenomenon that I've been noticing as I talk to people as well.
But I think that can be managed. You can always allocate time for meetings in the mornings, and then kind of block in certain times where you feel like you need to be productive, because otherwise you'll be in meetings all day, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's a trap that I think a lot of people fall into. So for me personally, I would have hour blocks, where I decide that I want to focus on my work, and unless something's on fire, that block stays there.
Okay. I think that's excellent. I want to ask you, since you're talking about productivity, I want to ask you what's your advice, what's your tip? Like, how do you manage to stay disciplined? Or right now you don't have to go to the office, and you can kind of work in your pajamas if you want to. So how do you kind of like stay disciplined and have a schedule and stuff like that?
Right. So I work based on user stories a lot of the time. And user stories basically break your work up into smaller bits by nature. And so I would think about, okay, for today, I'll focus on these 2 or 3 user stories, and I would get through them. And then that would be it for me. And then I would think about what else I would like to pick up next, or if I like to read some news on design or some articles on design, then I would have some spare time to do that. Yeah, but I would generally break up my work into user stories.
Okay, I think that's a good strategy. I think I want to ask 2 questions. One, because a lot of the language that you share and that you sound belong to the Agile methodology, right? It's Scrum and learning about Scrum and the process. I use Scrum as well back when I was working at Aviva. I want to maybe understand how important it is for, say, a UX designer to actually understand how to work in an agile manner and be agile, right?
I think having that set of language that you'll be able to use together with your developers or the rest of the development team is really important, and kind of following a schedule that is a 2-week cycle is also something that keeps me productive as a designer.
And I see you got a certification as a Scrum product owner in 2018. So yeah, is that something like people should say, company, please sponsor me, I want to go for Scrum training?
Absolutely, because I think learning about CSPO is something that helped me open my eyes a lot more, because as a designer you always want to design the best, most awesome app ever. However, as a PO, the role that you would have to take is to be able to prioritize what's the most important and what needs to go out first. And if you were able to understand that point of view, then the design becomes a lot more efficient.
Lovely. And I would like to also share, like, if you ever checked out Yen's LinkedIn profile, which I will share later, the link. Is it okay if everyone reach out to you on LinkedIn?
Yeah,
Tune in to the call. So yeah, if you ever check Yen's profile, she is a big learner, right? So she is not only a certified Scrum product owner, and I think she took courses from IDEO and as well as the courses that she mentioned about earlier from UPenn and UC San Diego. So I'm really interested, like how much time and how much money do you invest a year in training yourself?
For Coursera, it's really not that expensive. A course can go between $59 and $79 and $100-ish. So for me, if I were to say take 2 courses a year, then that would be about 200 plus Sing dollars. And that would be, usually when you take the courses, you would have to allocate maybe 3 to 5 hours a week just to finish your course materials as well as do the projects allocated.
Lovely. And
not really that much.
okay, so that's kind of like your usual schedule. So in a week, right? Like maybe just to understand, like out of say 7 days, how much time do you spend reading, or how much time do you spend upskilling yourself on average? Yeah.
I think every morning I would spend about half an hour just reading, say Tech in Asia or reading design blogs. I also listen to podcasts on the go. So that's one of the things that I do. And it really doesn't consume that much active time per se, because if you're on on like public transport and you're listening to a podcast, then it's kind of passive learning as well.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's really good. And it really depends on what kind of learner are you, right? Are you an auditory learner? Are you a visual learner? Are you a tactile learner? So those are the things that matter. And of course, like the kind of training programs that you go through have to appeal to your best learning modality. So Ivy from the audience asks, do you ever get pushback on your designs due to resource constraint? How do you manage that?
Yeah, all of the time.
Okay.
I think most of what I design as a designer kind of gets iterated and reiterated and reiterated, and sometimes it's because of resource constraints, sometimes it's not. But everything that you've designed gets prioritized by product owners as well as the rest of the team. So I think in that sense, it's also a resource constraint because you have X number of points that you can spend on certain stories every month. But yes, I do fight for things that I feel are important for my users. Pushback is very common, and you have to be able to confidently kind of stand and make your case as well, because business requirements sometimes get a little bit overwhelming, especially in finance, designing for finance. And what I would do would be sometimes to pull out user research and say, hey, our users said they were not understanding this. And therefore, it's really important to put, say, a tooltip, for example, and that's something that should be high priority.
Lovely. So you kind of have to stand your ground and defend your design.
Yeah. But I guess design always faces constraints from tech, from business, from many other.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's pretty normal.
Yeah, I think those are all very relevant points. And if there are any questions, we can take one or two more from the crowd. This would be a good time to ask them. I guess are there any questions from the audience? Thanks, Ivy, for the question. Isabel said, you mentioned user story. How do you gather the user story from real customer or persona? Wow, this is like an entire Agile Scrum course.
That's why it's a very complicated question to ask.
Okay, so Isabel, this would be best to actually go to a workshop and do it. But let's give it a Cliff Notes version. Yeah, do you have a Cliff Notes version?
Yeah. So, wow. Wait, let me think about it.
Okay. I can help you out. Okay, so yeah. I'm Agile certified as well. Okay, so user stories are basically a breakdown of what they're not stories of our users. Okay, they're basically a breakdown of what our users might want and might want to perform and when using the product and service. So it's kind of very much feature driven in that case. So how we write user stories, there's a certain format to it. And of course, if I were to explain it, it's going to take an entire lecture to explain it. But as much as possible, the idea is that we want to build features that users want, right? And the entire team gets to agree whether this is a feature that should go into the product, right? Whether we should spend time and resources to do it. And that is something that the team agrees on before it gets worked on. So the user stories are written. Usually a product analyst writes it or a business analyst writes it. And then after it's written, product owner looks at it, the designer looks at it, the technical lead looks at it, and then everyone says, okay, this is good, let's prioritize. Everyone prioritize it, and after that, it goes into the sprint. This is the Cliff Notes version. Okay, please do the full program. Sorry, we don't teach Agile over here, but if you have any questions, you can always come and ask me. But I would end off like, one of the key things I hear very much, and Yen, I would love to get your thoughts on it, is someone, when I first heard about Scrum, when I first heard about Agile, someone told me Agile is a mindset. It's not a certificate. It's a mindset, right? So what are your thoughts on it?
I think it's absolutely true. I think learning about the mindset is important, but kind of understanding how to build the minimum livable product and what you should release in the beginning, so that you'll be able to kind of get the users and keep your users happy, is something that requires a lot of skill to kind of plan out. And that's something that I think people should learn.
Lovely. Yen, feel free, if you have one final question, feel free to type it in. I hope I answered your question. Isabel, let us know whether we answered your question. One thing I would like to ask you, because many people here who attend our webinars are interested to break into the UX industry, or are still considering, whether to learn user experience design. So what would be the advice if, let's say, you would give your younger self on trying to breaking into this industry, or trying to learn UX?
UX is something that you can learn in bite-sized pieces. I think it's not something that's super complicated. It's not rocket science in the beginning. You can pick it up in little pieces, and you can learn on the go. And that's, I think, something that I learned in my beginning years, kind of stumbling around and making your mistakes and learning from them. That's quite important.
Can I ask you for a tip, because you seem like someone who got a lot of opportunities and then started like going into the roles you love. So what is your tip to convince or to persuade someone, that you can do a job that you are not prepared for?
Take it till you make it. No, just kidding. I think showing that you can bring value to the product is quite important, and kind of understanding the landscape that you're designing for and the people you're designing for before kind of going into a client meeting or going into an interview, and kind of doing your research to kind of level the playing field for yourself is really important.
And I also want to ask, like, aside from technical skills, aside from learning various softwares and things like that, what are the qualities of a good user experience designer? In fact, like, what would you look out for when you're hiring people into your team? Yeah.
I look for people who are curious, people who make learning a key objective in their role. I think being a key learner is something that I like in UX designers, and having an open mind, having good communication skills, being able to do the design work is one part of the job, but being able to communicate with your stakeholders and speak with the people around you is kind of a key skill as well. So these are the two things that I really look for in a designer, and also perhaps an idea of where they would like to grow as a designer. So many people start with a basic foundation of skills that they've picked up in design, but I like the idea of something called a T-shaped designer, where this person I have identified a field that they are interested in, for example, user research, and they would like to learn more and be better in that area. So when I look at teams as a whole, each of the designers should bring their own set of skills and expertise to complete a very balanced team.
Thank you for sharing, Ian. I'm sure that's been very helpful. In fact, there are two more questions. Let's see if we can combine them somewhat. So Rachel asks, I wanted to know your inclination for getting into the financial industry. And then Swati asks, I'm a UX rookie and I'm interested in fintech. Is industry knowledge really important in order to be considered for a role? I think you can kind of answer it together because you were not in financial services
Yeah, no,
before.
I wasn't.
Yeah. So why did you join financial services? And then the second question is like, how did you convince them that you can do the job? Yeah.
Yeah, so I joined finance because there were complex problems there to solve and real problems for real users. I personally like complex user flows. I like distilling a bunch of information and kind of simplifying it and making it a bit more meaningful for people. Having kind of stumbled around my banking apps for a while and having kind of learned how to invest in equities really poorly, I kind of felt the pain and I thought that it would be a meaningful thing to design for. And no, you do not need financial knowledge to design for fintech, because when I went in, it took me like 3 months to learn about different financial products and how they function, and then start to design from there.
Yeah. I would add, thanks for sharing, Yen. I think that's so relevant. I will add Swati as well. I remember when I was hired by Aviva, I had to go through, I don't know how many checks, like character checks, bankruptcy checks. I don't know how many checks and how many forms I have to sign. Like, oh, I'm okay. Yeah. So make sure that you do not, make sure that your record is clean, and that your like everything is prim and proper if you want to join financial services industry. So that is I think very, very key. I hope we answered your question, Rachel and Swati. Let us know if we did. And yeah, is there any like final advice or final word before I go on and share what are the upcoming events? Yeah, Swati and Rachel said thumbs up. Okay, you did. Lovely. So any final advice or final word for the audience over here, which is continuing to grow?
Yeah, absolutely. Continue to grow, continue to learn. As long as you're curious, you grow as a designer.
As long as you're curious, you grow as a designer. I don't know, is that like a very subtle endorsement to my company, but thank you very much. No, just kidding. Anyway, I'd like to take a couple of minutes to maybe share a little bit about what we do over here. And Yen, you feel free to stay around, and then we'll kind of like wave you off in a bit. So let's see, let me bring up what we do. So yeah, like I said, we are doing these weekly webinars because it's been COVID season, and frankly speaking, yeah, a lot of the design events have been cancelled and they have not happened for a while. So I thought, why not let's do some casual conversations. And usually when I attend design events, like people are quite serious. So let's just kind of like make it a little bit more casual and a little bit more entertaining. And we learn different things. It's always good to talk to different designers. I learn about different industries. So for those of you who are more introverted, at least when you come to this webinar, like I ask all the questions for you. You don't have to ask any question, and you get to benefit from the knowledge. So if you are enjoying what we're doing over here, and you have learned something tonight, right? If you have learned something tonight, please type in chat and tell us what did you learn, right? Like just kind of like briefly type in chat right now. And I will also encourage you to share on Facebook or LinkedIn using Leading into Change. Right, feel free to take a screenshot. If you do that, I will send you a 12-page UX career guide, which includes who is hiring, how much the industry is paying in general, what are some of the common interview questions that you get while breaking into the industry. And no matter what is your level as a designer, I think portfolio building tips is always helpful. So we did 2 webinar sessions with design leaders from from Grab and Canon Australia, and I've asked my teaching assistant to synthesize them into 6 essential portfolio building tips. Of course, if you're already a subscriber, you'll have a copy of it. But if not, I will send you a copy of it as well. So feel free to share. And at the same time, what I'll also like to share is that every Monday we do a UX workshop. So if you haven't had any exposure to the discipline of user experience design, and you just kind of want to know how it is and what goes on, feel free to come by to these workshops. I ask that maybe you make a voluntary donation to charity if you find it useful. But that's totally up to you, right? Essentially, the workshop is free and for the community. Okay, so I'm a big believer in reflection and learning. So please type what are your learnings today. So Yen also knows like you've been listening to her speak and not only just looking at her swords at the back and not paying attention. So next, I run a coaching program other than a 2-day weekend workshop that we do about UX, which covers the fundamentals. It's a very intensive program. We run a part-time coaching program, which is 4 months, and for people who want to break into the industry. So we don't cover much technical skills. In fact, I cover a lot on work experience, career skills. How do you kind of think as a UX designer? I've been teaching this for more than 3 years, right? Like starting from General Assembly. So now every time I teach it, I get new learnings, I get new nuance of how to like teach it better and how to like understand the subject even more. Like last week when we had Sarah over from Accenture Interactive, I learned new things myself, right? So I think this is a beautiful subject to learn. It's a great career path, and it's also a growing industry in general. So feel free to just reach out if you're interested to talk about your career goals. And if you're on Facebook and you're not on the list, please go to CuriousCore.com and feel free to just sign up. It's completely free. And yeah, let's look at the chat right now. What are people saying? Let's see. Ivy says, thank you. Great insights. All right. Valentine says, thank you so much. I have learned more. If you don't mind, everyone, since you're here, can I ask you to maybe turn on your camera, and then we'll just take a Wi-Fi, right? And just for the fun of it, right? And I think it's quite an interesting crowd today. Thank you, everyone, for. I don't have a camera on my computer. Can you give me a thumbs up? All right. Okay, everyone, no camera, just give us a thumbs up. All right, please use the thumbs up emoticon. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Okay, wonderful. So everyone, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. And I mentioned that I will add Yen's LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out to her. Yeah, I think you're getting good comments. We'll wave you off once you're done sharing your experience, and we'll see you around hopefully next week. Thank you so much for attending the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you. We'll wave you off.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night. Wow, it's pretty good feedback. Let's see. Okay.